Hello and welcome to another episode of the TarPack podcast. Yes, we are finally back. We are back for football season and eventually basketball and maybe even baseball season this year. But we are here to talk about NC State and UNC football in the ACC. So today's episode, we're going to do our roster kind of ratings, what's our thoughts and who are some of our favorite and who's going to be some of our best players and all that stuff. So we're going to get started here with the NC State Wolfpack. Let's get it started here. We're going to go position by position, and we're going to be going over most of these players. So let's start with the quarterback position for NC State, starting with their starter, Grayson McCall. What are your thoughts on Grayson McCall?
Our starter, Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina. Four-time conference player of the year for whatever conference he was in. I mean, obviously, because of a couple injuries, his stats went down a little, but still, if he could have that second year at Coastal Carolina where they're ranked in the top 15 as a school, not in a big conference, man, we are going to have a great opportunity this year with actually a good quarterback. He's shown good stats and everything. So, yeah, obviously we got Grayson McCall at number one.
This does hurt me to say, but even as a Carolina fan, I do think Grayson McCall is probably the best quarterback NC State has had, I guess, since Ryan Finley. It's been that long since they've had really a good quarterback. So Grayson McCall probably is that guy.
He is probably that guy, but, Devin Leary you could put him up there too. Even though, he had a honestly pretty stacked team of a lot of more average talent. So, yeah. And then for number two, I'm going to put C.J. Bailey at the second-string quarterback. He's a freshman coming in. And, I just have more faith in him because if you go to Lex Thomas and just look at his height, 5'11", still hadn't had that much playing time.
Very lowly recruited guy.
Yeah.
But was a legacy player here, so.
The Thomas brothers have just always been the stage, so it makes sense we gave him an offer. Even though do I really expect him to get any playing time for state, really? Not really. But
I will say this. If Grayson McCall gets injured, it could be pretty rough for NC State. C.J. Bailey has potential, but it could be really rough for NC State if he gets injured. Obviously not hoping that happens, but if it does, that would be unfortunate for NC State.
Yeah.
Moving on to the running back room, we got the Duke transfer Jordan Waters as RB1. What are your thoughts about it?
If I'm really talking about it, the transfer portal will really be saving NC State's life in a ton of sports, from basketball last year to football a lot of the years. The transfer portal has really been helping the pack. And obviously I got Jordan Waters, who had a pretty good year at Duke last year. More than pretty good, actually, a really good season, actually. And then for number two, I'm going to put Kendrick Raphael, even though I still got some faith in both the freshman guys right here. Hollywood Smulders did come from Oklahoma, so he didn't get playing time there, but obviously I do think he could be a potential really talented player. And from Charlotte, so it makes sense he came back, and he probably knew he wasn't going to get playing time at Oklahoma anyways.
I have to say, Clemson, Dabo Swinney just absolutely neglecting the transfer portal is going to come back to bite them, because all these transfers are guys that Clemson should have went after as well. But we'll get into more of that as we get into the wide receiver room, obviously led by their best receiver, Casey Concepcion. And I'll say this before I pass it on to you. Casey Concepcion is really the only proven guy in this entire room. He's a really good proven guy to have, but there's not much experience whatsoever besides him. And we'll have to see who falls in behind him, but obviously led by Kevin Concepcion in this room.
Yeah, Casey Concepcion has been one of, honestly, the greatest NC State wide receivers they've had. And, I mean, obviously, Emeka Emezi was great and stuff, but, I mean, he was a freshman last year, but, I mean, he put up one of, like, with Brennan Armstrong being our quarterback and MJ Morris sometime, and this man's still putting up wide receiver stats like that. I mean, doing that, just think about him if he was, like, at Carolina getting thrown from Drake May. This man would have like one of the greatest wide receiver like campaigns as a freshman, like literally ever.
And he did almost commit to Carolina, actually. Funny story.
And then Noah Rogers, honestly, he transferred from Ohio State, but I mean, if I'm being honest, I think Dakari Collins is an overall better wide receiver than Noah Rogers, because, I mean, last year he just had overall better stats and ran better routes and stuff. I mean, both of them, I mean, they have more to show. But then Terrell Anderson, 4-star from Grimsley High School. Freshman, obviously, a 4-star. I mean, he's another guy. We just need to give him a ton of great training. Like Casey Concepcion, I mean, he could be a great deep threat with us. And, yeah.
Moving on to the tight end room, one of the top, I'd say, top 3 tight end transfers in the portal was Justin Jolly. And he did end up committing to NC State, formerly of UConn. So tell me about him and the rest of this room.
Yeah, Justin Jolly had a very good season at UConn. Obviously, I mean, UConn, they're a basketball school. Not saying the Pack are not great at basketball either, but I mean, the UConn, obviously, their football program's never been really ever good. So, I mean, obviously, for being an actual good tight end, it makes sense you want to transfer to a school that has a better football program that actually cares about football. So it makes sense. And then Juice Vereen, obviously from our last year video, had high hopes on him. And I still got high hopes on him. He's still got a ton of talent. Trust him.
Very athletic.
Very athletic dog out there. And then Reed Mitchell, he's a great blocker. And then, I mean, overall, most of the time he will play for us. He will be there to block when we're doing some type of, like, run play or something else. And then to our offensive line, obviously, best player on the offensive line, probably third best player on our offense other than Grayson McCall and Casey Concepcion. Anthony Belton had been a great offensive lineman for NC State for many years now. He's been keeping this offensive line up. And then, obviously, Anthony Carter. He's been good enough. And I'm being honest, Zeke Carell, yeah, he's been showing that he is a reliable offensive line. And really, this whole NC State offensive line has shown that they are a reliable group. And then Timothy McKay, right guard, obviously, showed a lot of talent that he has. And then Jacarius Peak, I mean, had a couple of sacks last year, but didn't play as much. But we had a lot of players leave from the defensive line last year. And then
I will say this about your offensive line. It does seem to be a good group, and especially led by Dave Doran. They seem like they are a group that's going to be very feisty and very strong when they play.
Yeah. And then going to the left end, Davin Bain, obviously, been very reliable all these years, been always very talented, and just a very trustworthy person that's going to put all his heart out in every single game guy.
By far your best defensive lineman last year. The only really consistent, true, great pass rusher.
Mm-hmm. But there's another guy in this list I trust right below him, Red Hibbler. Very stacked, very talented player. with a ton of attributes inside of him.
Didn't play that much, but he does.
He just didn't play that much because of Davin Bain in front of him. But, I mean, if he went to a place like Carolina, I'm telling you, he would be starting. He would probably be the best one on Carolina right now. It's just having Davin Bain on there. And he still played a lot last year. I mean, he had multiple. Like, every time he played, he might have played, like, 10 snaps a game maybe. And he had at least a sack in a game. If you played Davin Bain time, you'd be like the same as him. It's just you can't play both of them. And then Traviel Price. Yeah, he's been. I mean, he's shown some skill. And then Noah Porter. Yeah, I definitely think he's a more reliable player than Price. And then defensive tackle Brandon Cleveland. Honestly, he looked actually not horrible last year. He looked pretty good. I mean, these guys are good at stopping the run. All of them are good at stopping the run. It's just Davin Bain is really the best at game for the quarterback. And then Nick Campbell, obviously last year didn't get really any playing time. To Chad Wallace, I mean, he got a little bit of playing time last year, and he's going to be a senior this year. He got a little bit of playing time from Colorado. At obviously, Terrell Timmons transferred there, but we got him. Kelvon McBride, freshman, coming in from Mobile, Alabama. Pass coverage is really his full-blown talent. Obviously, another freshman, so we can't say a ton about him, but we got a lot of trust for him. Sean Brown, obviously.
A former DB. Very light for a linebacker, I'll say that.
Yeah, very light for linebacker, but obviously we got to fill up the linebacker because obviously a lot of our linebackers are gone, including one of the best linebackers in college football, Peyton Wilson. And then Caden Fordham.
Speaking of Peyton Wilson.
These are the people that are saying he's going to be the next Peyton Wilson. Obviously, I wish I could say that, but I can't. I mean, the season hasn't even started, and I mean, if you're saying he's going to be the next Peyton Wilson, you're basically saying he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year in college football.
It's hard. I agree with you. It's definitely hard to say that, especially considering he's not quite the athlete that Peyton Wilson was, and he's obviously not as experienced yet, even though he did play a little bit last year. But you got some trustworthy guys in the room.
And I mean, really, and then Davin Betty, obviously senior. He's been very reliable for this team, for just energy and everything. Obviously, he hadn't done everything perfect. And then Aiden White, perfect just pass coverage. Definitely the best player on this defense, other than defensive line. Probably still the best player on this defense. Obviously, he's just been great all these years. I mean, pass coverage, everything. I mean, he had 92 speed. It's very hard to cook this man unless he just sells on the route that you're running. So, I mean, yeah. He's a SWAT. Oh, Brandon Size. Yeah, sophomore. Didn't get much playing time last year. He's been, haven't seen that much out of him. And then Devin Marshall transferring from Villanova. Obviously, don't really know that much about him because, I mean, transferring from Villanova. And he's really going to watch Villanova football. It's a basketball school. To Corey Colley, transferring from Maryland to NC State. Obviously, didn't get that much playing time. Wanting to play a lot more in the senior year. So he decided to transfer to State to try to get that playing time. And then Keshard Palmer, sophomore, actually had a not a horrible sophomore campaign. So I expect him to play even more this year. He showed some good skill. And then Davin Boykin, senior, have been very reliable all these years, just like Davin Bain and Aiden White and all of them. Very reliable player and trustworthy. And then Jihad Carter, transferring from Ohio State, another Ohio State player. Obviously coming over here because it's his senior year, and he really never played at Ohio State. Like, never. So, I mean, obviously he's just trying to get more playing time, get on the field more than he did at Ohio State, and just get a bigger opportunity at State. And then obviously our kicker, Patrick Minnick, senior. And obviously after that, that's going to be NC State's final roster for me for the 2024-2025 season.
All right, now to the North Carolina breakdown. Starting at quarterback, where it's a very, very interesting predicament, I guess you could say, Carolina's in. We have three quarterbacks that all are, I would say, capable of starting in the ACC, but no one that is necessarily above the other one as we sit here right now. Max Johnson, left-handed quarterback, formerly of Texas A&M, played at LSU as well even before that. Has had some good season, but had some injury issues that kept him off the field a good bit. But he's probably the leading candidate for the job, but is definitely far from locked up right now. Connor Harrell, the backup, a guy who's great on his feet. He can really got some great speed for a quarterback and can make plays happen. But he's only a redshirt sophomore, so it's not necessarily experience is not necessarily on his side right now. And finally, Jacoby Criswell, senior, redshirt junior technically, transfer from from Arkansas, but he actually started his career at North Carolina out of high school, competed against Drake May for the starting job 2 years back. So, three good options. I would probably have it in this order right here because Jacoby Criswell doesn't quite know the playbook now since it's a new coordinator since he last was here. Max Johnson, because of the experience, I feel like he's probably going to get the edge. But if he struggles, is not anything that's going to have his job locked up whatsoever. So, moving on to the running back position, O'Marion Hampton, All-American running back last year. Just a fantastic player. Over 1,500 total yards, was absolutely phenomenal for Carolina. Didn't even start the season as a starter and still had all those accolades and stats. So this year should be great for him as well. Hopefully with an improved offensive line, even though defenses are going to focus more on him this year than they did last year. Behind him is Darwin Barlow, a transfer from USC, who didn't play much last year and hasn't played much throughout the course of his career, but he has almost 1,000 yards over his entire 4-year career previous to this, and it should be a good, stable backup for this team. Caleb Hood's a guy with really good upside who just has had really a hard time staying healthy throughout the course of his career, and true freshman Davion Goss is in here as well. Don't know how much we'll see him, but he's got potential for sure. At wide receiver, number one guy here is J.J. Jones. This is a wide receiver room that has a ton of talent, but as far as consistent, proven guys, it's not very good from that standpoint. I think Nate McCollum is a little underrated in this thing here, but Kobe Paysour, J.J. Jones, Nate McCollum, those are your three guys that are proven, and we know what they can do.
See, it's like Carolina has the more talented overall wide receiver room, but NC State has the more overall better wide receiver out of the group, like the best wide receiver out of all wide receivers on both teams, but Carolina has the better overall group.
Yeah, wait till Chris Culliver gets in the field. But no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, besides them, Gavin Blackwell is a very speedy wide receiver, but has had some inconsistencies. Chris Culliver, a very young receiver who didn't play much, but we'll see what he can do this year. And behind that, Paul Billups, Jordan Shipp, Christian Hamilton, Javarius Green, Alex Taylor from Grimsley. A whole bunch of talent in there, just not much proven guys. So we'll see how they come along throughout the course of this year. At tight end, this is probably the best position group top to bottom on the team. We have three potential NFL tight ends in this room. Love this group. Bryson Nesbitt is an elite receiving threat at the tight end position. He's rated at 88 overall in this game, and could have went to the NFL last year, but decided to come back, and very happy he did. Behind him, I would say John Copenhaver is probably the second guy, because Jake Johnson is a transfer and hasn't been there, done that for this team. But John Copenhaver, a good all-around player, a guy who is going to make the plays that he needs to make, just solid in all aspects of the game. And Jake Johnson, brother of Max Johnson, the quarterback, as talented as they come in the tight end room, he's going to be a great player. Formerly the number one tight end in his recruiting class back in the day. And we got some talent behind him in these rooms as well.
But see, Jake Johnson, the brother of Mac Johnson, if Mac Johnson is starting, that means they could have more chemistry together for themselves. Where, I mean, he could be over like John Copenhaver, because he could just have overall just more talent with the quarterback on the field.
That is possible. That is a good point there. I wouldn't doubt if something like that does take place, especially if Max Johnson is the starting quarterback. On the offensive line, it's a group that's been very bad since Mac Brown came back for his second stint in Chapel Hill, but a group that definitely has potential. Howard Sampson is a massive 6'8", 325 pounds.
Monster.
Yes, a transfer from North Texas who is only a redshirt sophomore, a guy who did not play much, but a guy that has insane potential, great movement skills for a guy his size, but just needs some polish and work and technique and stuff like that. So we'll see. He's got potential, but can he get there this year? And behind him, Eli Sutton, a guy who is a redshirt junior who hasn't played much, highly touted guy, but he just hasn't been able to get over the hump yet, but we'll see if he can. At left guard, it's going to be Jonathan Dorno or Malik McGowan in all likelihood. These guys are both going to be competing for this job. Who knows who wins it? We will end up seeing. Center, Austin Blasky, transfer from Georgia. He played tackle at Georgia. He's kind of like the sixth man of that offensive line, but comes here and switches to center to see if he can make it to the next level. At right guard, our best offensive lineman, at least for right now, is Willie Lampkin, 88 overall. He's a small guy, really, really small for an offensive lineman, but a guy that does have all the grit and technique that you could ever ask for. Behind him is Zach Rice, who is significantly overrated at an 83 overall.
Never touched the field in college football, like halfway, and they gave him an 83 overall. I do not know what this game is doing. I understand he was a 5-star. That does not really matter. I'm telling you, Georgia's 3-stars are different. You don't even understand me, but you wait. If your team is getting a Georgia 3-star, I'm telling you, he's going to be one of the greatest players on your team for that year.
But yeah, Zach Rice, a guy who came in to Chapel Hill as a 5-star recruit, but just has not developed basically at all since he's got here. We'll see what kind of steps he can make this year, but I would not even consider giving him an 83 at this point, but we'll see where he goes.
And we're still going to get to one other overhyped player on this board by EA College Football 25. And Jeremy...
Not overhyped to this level, though.
Yeah. And he knows who I'm talking about.
At right tackle, we have Travion Green, a massive man himself, 6'8", 340, with just absolute monster hands. Basically built like a gorilla out there at right tackle. But he should be very good for us. A very young, very raw potential type of guy. And behind him, Ja'Kai Leftwich, transferred from Georgia Tech, who we have high hopes for as well. Switching over to the defense, at the left end spot, we have Desmond Evans, who is a 82 overall. A guy who's a really good run defender when he can get out there, a former 5-star. Formerly the number 2 player in the class of 2020, according to ESPN, entering his redshirt senior season, or his COVID senior season, I should say. But yeah, Desmond Evans has been a really good run defender. The pass rush hasn't been there, but he's a great athlete, with potential to eventually be that guy. He just hasn't been that quite yet. And behind him, a guy I really like, Bo Atkinson, just kind of built like those, the Bosa brothers, the Watt brothers, just that kind of mold that you see from those type of guys that is just a feisty competitor that just loves to get after the passer. So we're hoping to see that from Bo Atkinson again this year. And Jacoby Cowan, who could surprise some guys this year, former Ohio State transfer. At the right end spot, the best overall player on the defense, in my opinion, Kamen Rucker. Only way to stop this guy is to hold him, which somehow teams do get away with quite often, actually, unfortunately. But Kamen Rucker, great player. I'll call it right now. I think he's going for double-digit sacks this year if he stays healthy. He's just that type of player. Very good player there. Behind him, Malachi Hamrick, a really good athlete who we'll see what he can do. He's still a very young player, so we'll see. But at the defensive tackle spot, we got a whole bunch of guys that are kind of just average, in that kind of average range. But Cam Hester, a steady force across the defensive line. Javari Rissi, a guy who hasn't lived up to his potential at this point, but he's been a guy who has played quite a bit in Chapel Hill, and we'll see what he can do this year. We'll see a guy like Joshua Harris inserted into this game later on when the roster updates come out, a former transfer from NC State and Ole Miss. So we'll see what he plays like, but I've heard some good things from him, a massive human being of his own. Here we go to Travis Shaw, the other former five-star.
Yeah, I can do this myself. Another man who's barely touched the field. Now Travis Shaw, has actually played in some games, a couple, but every game he has played in, has he even had a tackle in college football this year?
Yeah.
It might be like one or two.
He's
some tackles, but still. This man had not done. He still has the potential. This man used to be a 5-star.
I'll say this: he does have maybe the highest potential of anyone on the entire team. Former 5-star, has all the athleticism you could ever want, but can't stay away from buffets. He clearly has a problem with that, and we'll see where he gets after this year. His motivation, let me say this. If you put Kamen Rucker in Travis Shaw's body, this is the greatest defensive player in the history of North Carolina. Yes, I'm including Lawrence Taylor in that. But Travis Shaw just has seemingly no dog to him. If he had dog,
look if he had dog. This man is 6'6", 330. Bring that down to like 300. Put Kamen Rucker inside of him. 6'6" still. This man would be insane. The pack would be like double teaming Kamen Rucker and Travis Shaw, and then just leaving the other offensive lineman, because we already know Carolina's offensive line just ain't good either way. We could leave the other four like wide open.
Yes, I remember when this game officially dropped. Travis Shaw was bald for some reason, so I'm glad to see they got that fixed. But Rodney Lure is another guy who has been showing some flashes in camp, along with Joel Starlings. At the linebacker position, Jabron Harvey and Tyler Thompson kind of battling for like a backup type of role. At the middle linebacker spots, we have Power Eccles, followed by Marty Campbell. Those are your two guys that are going to be starting there. Power Eccles, going to be one of the leaders of this defense, a guy who's just been a steady force, like a 2.5-year starter now. So we'll see, probably off to the NFL after this year, but we'll see. He's been great for us. And behind him, we got a collection of guys that have potential. Michael Shore, Ashton Woods, Caleb Lavallee, Cade Law, Cruz Law, all kinds of guys in that grouping. And moving on to the cornerback room, you got Marcus Allen and Elijah Huzzie as your two outside boundary starters. I would actually have Elijah Huzzie as the highest overall defensive back on the team. He had a really good season last year, playing all over the place. So this year, hopefully, he's going to be more on the outside instead of last year where he was moving inside and out. So I'd actually have Elijah Huzzie as the best DB. He's got incredible hands, great instincts, and just a sticky coverage player. And Marcus Allen is a guy with prototypical height and frame, a guy who's building upon his weight, a great potential man-to-man guy with good speed, good athleticism, a guy who can really take a nice step up this year on what's already been a decent career for him at Carolina. And behind that, you got Tyron Stewart, who's probably our third guy, a JUCO transfer with Ty Adams. You got Trey Miller in there as well, and some other guys in the slot, which we'll get into. Actually, let's go ahead and talk about those slot guys. The slot guys, we're going to be talking about like Caleb Cost and potentially DeAndre Boykins, even though he might be playing a little bit more safety. But Caleb Cost is going to be another one of those slot corner guys who also plays baseball, by the way, but a really good athlete, a guy with great instincts and football IQ, and like he was talking about earlier, 3-star from Georgia that are just fantastic. Into the safety room, you got Jakeen Harris at free safety from NC State and Stick Lane from Georgia State as your 2 starting safeties.
I'll just say something else. Jakeen Harris, great for state, and I mean, he was from Georgia. I'm telling you. Any coaches, if you ever watch this, I'm telling you, you got to go for Georgia players.
That is true. But I really like this safety room for Carolina. You got Jakeen Harris. You got Will Hardy as a backup in that room. You got Antavius Lane, Stick Lane, and DeAndre Boykins. That's a really, really good group of 4 safeties there. We'll see how good they are. DeAndre Boykins is a guy who played slot corner 2 years ago before he got injured before last season. He was really good for us, so I'm glad to have him back. And some young guys with insane potential as well. Jaden Patterson, a freak athlete with some great speed, and Malcolm Ziegler's another guy. And Ty White is a highly recruited guy as well. So we'll see how this team turns out. But getting into the kickers, Noah Burnett, one of the best returning kickers in the nation probably. Just a guy who had to overcome some of the mental aspects of being a kicker in college football. But he really put that together and was great for Carolina last year, replacing Ryan Coe. And Liam Boyd's a kickoff specialist. And punting, Tom McGinnis, there are major questions about him, considering he wasn't very consistent or good last year, but we'll see how that goes. All right, guys, thank you for tuning into this episode. Any last words?
And just one thing for kickers. I mean, obviously, they really do got one of the toughest jobs in all of football. I mean, obviously, just playing in any game and it comes down to a field goal, and if you miss it, I mean, I can say for a State fan, from the amount of times we just lost to Clemson where we could have beat them by missing a field goal. I mean, you could be one of the greatest kickers, and that could just bring you down so much if you just sell and just miss a kick in that big of a game.
Yeah, that is definitely true. All right, thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the TarPack Podcast. We'll be back next week to discuss our record predictions for this team, as well as some maybe player of the year and stuff like that. Thank you guys for tuning in. Go Heels.
Go Pack.